It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 457. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Path of Exile.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Microtech, where innovative creativity meets creative innovation.
Thalen.
The infinite is possible at Zombocom.
Second week in a row.
Well, nobody reacted to it last week.
It's a classic.
For something reminded me of the old internet last week, and that was why I brought it up then. But I actually went and looked. Zombocom works on mobile devices.
Incredible.
This was not expected.
This makes me need to go. Which college had the hilarious art webpage? Was that Yale?
I think so.
Is that still going?
Which art webpage?
If you wanted to see just some truly awful web design, there was a college...
Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. It still looks like that.
art.yale.edu?
Yep.
Excellent. Bell, if you want to ever see some just truly excellent web design, art.yale.edu.
Okay. So, since this one's gotten bumped several weeks in a row, we're going to start off with it. Hey Tam, want to dive into this topic?
Oh, man. I'm actually better equipped to dive into this topic than I was previously. Okay. So I've played... This came to mind because I was playing Cyberpunk again. And at the same time was watching... And I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as I possibly can with this topic, but it was really striking to me seeing people's reactions to the end of Baldur's Gate 3. While I'm playing through Cyberpunk again and thinking about other games. And one of the things that is really, really, really hard to do is have a game where you have a bunch of branching choices and then actually end it.
Yeah.
And
endings are real hard.
Endings are
just
hard
in general. So
yeah,
this makes it extra hard.
Exactly. Endings are hard in a just a general sense, but when you've got a bunch of other things that are you don't know exactly how it might shake out, or what state the player might be in.
Yeah, if your player has very specific ideas on how their characters would react.
Yeah.
I mean, this is even true. This is frequently a problem even in the middle of a game where players are the answer I want to give is not present. And the character I have in my head playing this would not react this way.
Yeah, once upon a time, the text that you would see when you selected a choice in an RPG was literally what your character would say. And now it's more, it saves space and it gives some more vibes, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's less
sort of like a summary.
Yeah, it's like a summary. Or
the first game I remember feeling this in was Mass Effect, the first one.
Yeah.
And that game cheats a lot. It has several summaries share voice lines, and you sort of read into it whatever you thought from the summary.
Mm-hmm.
A thing you don't actually get to know unless you play the game multiple times.
Right.
I do recall that Fallout 4 does this, and one of the extremely popular mods is quit that.
Yes.
Show me what I'm actually
Fallout 4
going
is
to
where
say.
a little less accurate, I should say.
Yeah. You run into some inaccuracy there, but at the end of the day, I think we've talked about the melon snake approach.
Uh-huh.
Because from a game dev standpoint, one of the ways that you can do that, one of the ways that you can handle that is basically constrain, and people complain about this now that they see it, but it keeps things sane to constrain your paths so that they branch out, but then they come back through in a bottleneck. And as long as you keep doing that, your paths don't like diverge so wildly that you can't actually resolve them. But then and you know, it's not really spoilers. Cyberpunk is no different, but boy does it feel different. And the other game that I think of that's like this is Fallout New Vegas, where like those two games, and I was struggling to try to think of any other ones that have that much weird choices, that many weird choices that you can make that still resolve in a way that feels like really good payoff.
I know like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 are games that usually get brought up for this as doing a really good job with it.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I've never actually played them all the way through, so I don't know.
There's a lot of side paths in those games that can take you in different directions than, you know, the core game.
Yeah, I mean, famously, Fallout New Vegas is incredible for this, where like you have to engage in some serious off the rails play to get to like not just the secret ending, but the series of possible secret endings.
Well, and I know that this is also... I know enough about Cyberpunk to know there's a bunch of different endings, because I heard people talking about how like they felt like the game really only had one ending they felt was good from their perspective. Like all of the endings are the endings, but they only liked one. There was only one good ending.
Yeah, and
I feel like those people are correct.
I don't know enough about this game to know what that is.
It's interesting. I think that I have heard 3 of the like 6 endings. I guess 7 now with the DLC. I have heard most people agree that there is one ending that is unequivocally bad. And that's not surprising because it involves failing the final mission.
Yeah. Like
and,
literally bad end.
Like it's the bad ending. It makes no bones about it. It's really sad. And then there's some other endings that are not actually good. Like you've been warned and you can make a choice and they're not good endings. And then there's there's 3 that people argue are the good ending, depending on what perspective you have. But it's interesting because they all do wrap up a game with a lot of complex threads. And like it's probably one of the games with the best ending payoffs I've seen. And the thing that struck me about people talk about Mass Effect 3's ending as disappointing, and like I have an absolutely wild way I would finish Mass Effect 3 if I were in creative control of that game in retrospect. It's a weird scenario there. But I feel like a lot of people's complaints about Mass Effect 3's ending was that it didn't really feel like it paid off the choices you made.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I thought Mass Effect 2 actually did do some payoff for the choices you made.
Yes,
it was very good at that.
Mm-hmm. It was excellent at that.
And then like 3 came along and just didn't.
I mean, they're
It's
kind
sort
of
okay at it during most of the game, and then falls kind of short right at the end.
Yeah. Right, like all 3 endings are unsatisfying endings, and not just for the obvious reason.
There's a 4th unsatisfying ending too.
Yeah, there is.
Well, and Mass Effect 3 is just basically the entire game is a string of you tying up all of the loose ends through the series. So it's like ending after ending after ending, and so many of them are satisfying until the very last one.
Right.
But the other thing that I was thinking about is, again, avoiding actual spoilers about the ending. Like one of the things that people have been complaining about Baldur's Gate 3 is that it ends a little bit too abruptly. Like it actually pays off a lot of what you do, but it doesn't spend enough time with it to feel satisfying.
Well, like the thing that I love about games that, have a lot of investment is there's usually what I call the victory lap, where you have this period of time where you get to see like the good of the decisions you made, and like you kind of get to wallow in it for a bit, and it's fun. Like I spent, 100 hours. Now here's this payoff for my 100 hours. And the games that don't have a victory lap feel just unsatisfying sometimes.
There's no denouement. Is I think the fancy term you're
Yes,
looking for.
that is the correct term for it.
And I was thinking about, it, like, I have seen these where you have this, extended sequence where you can run around some part of the world and talk to people, and it's very interactive and so forth. Cyberpunk is just people leaving you voicemails during the credits, but it works. You've got like a little. I mean, it also does have a denouement, like here's what has actually happened to you, and then the credits are full of voicemails. Video mails, but from all of the characters, like basically every character that you've meaningfully interacted with, that's like what's happened since the ending with them, in the context of them calling you to like fill you in. And it didn't, I didn't need to run around going to find all of them and talking to them and so forth. Like, it's such a nicely packaged ending that it feels really satisfying. But also I think about like having played through all of the Cyberpunk endings at this point, there's probably 10 to 15 hours of game content just in endings. And you only really see 1.5 to 2 of it, depending on what ending you chose.
Yeah, I mean, because there's some of the endings that share a general shape of an ending.
Yeah, but like the final mission that you have varies wildly depending on who you're with. Like way more than I realized or expected. And I think it's interesting to think about, like, from a development, like, investment perspective, the ending is the last thing you do because you need everything else in place. But some of these games have just a huge amount of investment in that ending, and it feels really satisfying. Versus like, well, you got to the end and it's done. Hi, Xenogears. Like, you can tell when they ran out of money, and they did their best.
Did anyone else who played Undertale take the time to go through that game's denouement?
There's quite a lot of it.
There's quite a lot of it.
There is so much of it. I think that's one of the reasons that game stuck with a lot of people, is because of the denouement at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think about Hades is another one where, like, that game has a weird approach to the concept of a denouement.
That game has a weird approach to the concept of ending.
That too.
Also that. And like I have put an amount of time into that game that should have exhausted all of the content in it. And like every so often I hop in and find something that I hadn't seen. And
the amount of text in that game is unreal.
Yeah.
Like, just completely insane.
It's bonkers.
But like, I guess that's sort of what Supergiant felt they needed to do for a roguelike, because they don't know how many times you're going to die, how many times you're going to fail. And
they want to keep it satisfying the whole time. And that's like, I don't know, it's nonsense. It's crazy to me. Like it's so hard to know what kind of experience you're having, or it's hard to know what kind of experience somebody else is going to have playing through a game. And especially when you have so many different choices and options, getting to something that's like, wow, that's actually really satisfying. I'm really happy that I got there, in a way that actually is an explicit ending. Because I think a lot of times when I see, games that because I went looking up like endings that people really liked, and people have been talking about Armored Core 6, people have been talking about Nier Automata, and some people have talked about Disco Elysium, which I also think pays off an unbelievably complex series of things very satisfyingly. But a lot of those games are really, really difficult to understand. Like the endings of AC6 and Nier are weird, and like Souls games are very similar, where like the endings are weird and kind of intentionally poorly explained.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think I've talked before about how I don't have a lot of patience for the oh, it's so vague, so mysterious and unknown, because like I know how easy it is to build a puzzle box with nothing in it. And so like I see these games that have these endings that people like, and it's like, oh yeah, they built a bunch of puzzle boxes and they didn't really pay them off. They're leaving you to figure out how do you interpret the ending, which is fine, but it doesn't impress me the way like an actually explicit ending that is satisfying despite the complexity does. And I really had a hard time thinking of like which games do feel that way that aren't like totally linear, because the ones that do really stick with me.
I don't know. We've seen some real satisfying endings in games that are linear. Like,
Also true. Yeah.
FF14 decided to wrap up its major storyline, and it did a great job of it.
Well, okay. Like,
Well, wrap up.
it did a good job, except for it gave us no choice at the end to a ending that I would have changed.
That's
I mean,
fair.
Look,
It wasn't.
that character's whole
FF14 is
thing-
not a branching storyline. It was never going to give you a choice at the end.
and that character in particular would not give you a choice.
That too, but
It was such a good ending up until the part where I had the thing that I liked the story being actually this person doesn't matter and we don't care about them.
Yes.
Because that person didn't really matter and I really didn't care about them.
Yeah, like,
and I was kind of ignoring that part because that person didn't really matter, and I didn't really
Yes.
care about them.
Yes, and then at the very end, that character shows up and says, "Notice me, senpai."
like it's so perfect, except for that one moment, and it's because I guess my reaction and our reaction collectively is wildly different than the folks working on the game's reaction to that character.
Oh, I think
A lot of
that
people
character's
like that
very
character.
popular. I was
A
about
lot of
to
people
say,
like that
no,
character.
no.
I just don't. But again, I was actually kind of ignoring that part because I didn't care about that character, and everything else was great.
That's very true.
Yeah, like sometimes there's like everything is so good minus one misstep that I'm just like, you know what? I can ignore that misstep. It's fine. I mean, honestly, it's kind of how I feel about Mass Effect 3.
Right? Yeah, like
Reasonable.
that. The Citadel expansion is the correct ending.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
just ignore the last 5 minutes of the game.
honestly,
Fine.
yeah. Like I finished the Citadel DLC and then cool. Call it good.
Yep.
We fly off to the inevitable end. I don't need to fight things for an hour and a half and then have an unsatisfying final cutscene.
But like the sub cutscenes up to the final ending are all really satisfying too. Like as part of that big
this is
combat
true.
block, like you have several interactions with characters that are very satisfying until the very end. Like
I'm not sure what it says, but I do think one of maybe my favorite ending of a game is and it's very linear, is Wolfenstein The New Order.
Is that the first of the remakes?
That's the first of the remake.
Yeah, that one was really good.
And then they kind of went and undercut the whole ending with the second game,
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
made me not like the second game kind of off the bat.
I mean, honestly, that was my initial reaction to Mass Effect 2. And like, I mean, I played Mass Effect 1 when it
Mass
came
Effect
out,
had a
played it all the way
satisfying
through.
Conclusion.
What?
Said Mass Effect 1 had a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah. And then I go straight into Mass Effect 2
Yeah.
and I turned it
Did
off.
they undo
within
the
an
whole
hour.
thing?
Yeah.
Like I was done with that game within an hour
Yup. That's my story with Mass Effect 2 as well.
and came back to it like, I mean, literally years later and was like, oh, this is incredible. Now that I know what I'm getting into, this is incredible. Yeah, I don't think you could do a sequel to Cyberpunk that isn't completely new characters.
yeah, I think it would ruin the potential endings that people landed on. If you were to say your character arc didn't matter, here's what the real one was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that it was interesting seeing what they did with the anime, because like they added some stuff in Edge Runners that like contextualizes the game, and then in the game they add a bunch of stuff from Edge Runners that just like acknowledges that it happened, but it doesn't really matter to you personally.
Right. I mean, like, I thought those missions were really well done.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's mostly like chasing a couple cosmetics.
Yep. But yeah, after playing several games in a row with variously satisfying endings. Notably, I did actually like the ending to Baldur's Gate 3. They could have spent more time. I could have spent more time in it, but I didn't need to.
There could have been. Is the issue not enough denouement?
Yeah, basically. But I wasn't like sad about it. And like Armored Core 6 was cool through a variety of endings. And then Cyberpunk adds a new ending with the DLC, which, boy, sure is a choice. That one's probably also a bad ending, which I think is a bold move. Make your new DLC secret ending a bad one.
I mean, that's also it's very interesting because while they are very like mysterious endings, the endings of from games are not always ordered in like good to bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some level, I think that the endings of From games are often like aggressively ambiguous.
Yeah. I do think endings are hard, and it's especially hard if one of the constraints is budget.
Oh God, yeah, 100% agreed.
It's not a game, but this is basically my take on DuckTales and the Owl House.
It's going to be interesting to see. This is the last season of Star Trek Discovery, and that show took a bit to find its feet, and did, and I think it's really cool. But I don't know how they're going to wrap it up.
Were they? Yeah, and was it? Did they know this was the last season at the start of the season?
I have no idea.
Yeah, because that makes a difference too.
In the meantime, on the other hand, the ending to Next Generation was incredible. I think DS9 was also very good.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, going back to games, I can certainly think of more than one game where you reach a certain point in the game and you realize, oh, this is where the money ran out, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Half-Life. I'm looking at you, Original System Shock.
And you get okay, so prime example of this is Rage.
Halo.
Because Rage, when it first shipped, I literally thought I'm in the first part of I've just finished the first part of the game, and now the next 2/3 of the game are going to start, and it's credit roll and it's over.
And I think that's at least some of why I often think of video games as often having those kind of jarring you have to interpret it yourself kind of endings, because that's the kind of ending you can make when you don't have a lot of money left and you got to get this thing out and this thing ships in 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, okay, modern example of this is Diablo 4's ending. That's a non-ending. And sure, that's probably a game that's going to get DLC that maybe resolves it, but it's a very non-ending.
Yeah, but it follows in a tradition of non-endings. Diablo 3 had 2 endings, both of which left things very open.
It's less of an ending than either of those endings.
Oh.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's just a very unsatisfying ending. Okay, cool. I guess that happened.
I was actually thinking of Risk of Rain. The first game has a basically non-ending, but that game barely kind of needs an ending.
Oh my goodness. I was about to say, I love the end stage of Risk of Rain because
the end stage is awesome. Did it need anything after the boss fight? Nope, not really.
No, it really didn't. But the end stage uses its soundtrack to sort of recontextualize the rest of the game, which I think is so interesting. And you posted at our music channel the soundtrack to that ending level, and I was like, oh yeah, I deeply remember the awkwardness of going from high adrenaline, high octane, go 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 while you're murdering all of these enemies to this just somber thing, but you're still doing blowing up screens full of enemies. Oh, this feels different and awkward, and what have I become? What did this game do to me?
Yeah, and that's sort of the vein that most of the endings, such as they are. And more if you actually go and read some of the passenger log. That game hides way too much story in text you will not see by playing the game. You just won't. It's fine. That's not a game that needs a ton of story, but it makes an interesting counterpoint to this sort of thing.
Makes me think of playing through Borderlands 1 with Kodra.
Oh yeah.
And at the end, we were like, what have we become?
What was any of this?
Nothing for it. Time to become a bandit and just start murdering people because we're so
Yeah.
furious.
I mean, it's not even subtext. Like, it's text. The game turns people into violent maniacs. The planet does. So
Yeah, and you spend the entire game hearing people say that and being like, yeah, but I'm built different. And then at the end, it's like, are you really?
You were just doing stuff for this random person in your ear, and by the way, she wasn't who she claimed to be.
So this weekend, I was going to take a break from PoE and actually play some narrative games. And I started Alan Wake 2 last night, and I have no idea where I am in the story, but I'm like 9 chapters into it, so I don't know how long that game is, but wow, is that a good game.
I
thought you didn't like Alan Wake 1.
I hated the gameplay of Alan Wake 1. I loved the story of Alan Wake 1.
Okay.
Like, I forced myself through it after playing Control.
That makes
Like,
sense.
Control made me care about the story of Alan Wake enough to suffer through the story of Alan Wake. And I thought the story was really good. And Quantum Break, also really good story. Control, really good story.
Yeah.
Remedy has been trying to do this thing their entire career where they want to seamlessly mesh live action and rendered game graphics. And they've tried this to different effects in Control and Quantum Break, but like Alan Wake 2 is their masterclass in how to fade in and out of real world and in-game seamlessly without feeling jarring at any given time, because it's blending in and out constantly, and it works. It really works for the type of game that Alan Wake 2 is.
I'm so excited that they kind of figured that out because of how long they've definitely been like, this is the thing we're doing.
Right.
Come hell or high water.
And every game, they've gotten a little closer to it. Like, Control was pretty good, especially like where Control nailed it was how good the in-world live action video was, and that you just stumbled upon it. Now, Alan Wake blends partial acted real world scenes with, digital acted scenes, and it works. Like, it works.
That is so bonkers to me.
Yeah.
Especially from like old FMV games.
Right. Like, it's like normally there's a certain uncanny valley hitching to it, and it's just gone. Like, it is perfect in this game. And like the voice acting is really good. It is even like it is doubling down on making random references to the Remedyverse as a whole. There's so much crossover between Control and Alan Wake 2, especially. And there's also lots of callbacks to, the original Alan Wake. There's, a certain amount of things that I like. They don't have the license to it anymore because Microsoft owns it, but like there's certain characters that I think are supposed to represent characters in Quantum Break. So it's really cool. And yes, there's flashlight gunplay, but they have made it not dumb. Like, it doesn't feel awful. And it's way more like it's a scarier game than the first game. Because like in the first game, anytime you encountered the shadow people, you like had a script to follow. Like, okay, now I need to shine the flashlight until it breaks the shield, and then I can kill them. Well, this game plays with that a lot. So you're going to encounter a lot more shadow people that don't ever materialize into anything. So like you have to kind of be on your toes at all times because you never know exactly when one of them is going to come for you. Because like you can just walk straight through a lot of them and completely ignore them. But every so often one of them, you know, you catch their attention and goes after you. So like that's cool. The two sides of the game are really cool. So there's a character named Saga that is an FBI agent, and then there is, you know, Alan Wake. And there's two separate paths through the game, and essentially you have to do both sides to reach the conclusion of the game, or based on what I can tell, but it is your choice which way you want to go. Like they are two separate paths that are, you know, explorable. Like if you're really enjoying playing Saga, you could just keep going down the Saga path, and at any point you can switch over to go down the Alan Wake path. And there's some interesting stuff that happens. Like, so in the Alan Wake path, you know, they both have this mechanic where if you hit tab, you basically go into their mind, and there's a room that they have in both of the characters' minds as they're trying to figure stuff out. So like in Alan Wake's, there's a storyboard on a chalkboard, and as he's trying to figure out how the flow of the story, he's like organizing plot elements, you know, and scenes and who's attached to a scene. And by collecting new motivations, you can like change out a scene so that like it rewrites the rules of reality and lets you view the scene from a totally different perspective. And so like real time, it will, you know, there's this whole sequence that plays out where it like re-renders the world to fit these new parameters. And then on the Saga side, you know, she's got a classic detective, you know, pictures and thumbtacks and red string that, you know, helps you solve out pieces of the story. Yeah, like it's really cool. Like they're doing a lot of interesting things.
How much knowledge of Alan Wake should I have if I want to play this game?
So beautiful thing is, like this week they released a musical number that explains all of Alan Wake 1.
I swear.
Musical number.
Yes.
Okay.
And it actually is in game. Like, okay, so like they released that as a music video, but that sequence exists in game. It's amazing. It is. Okay, so like Control has one of the coolest sequences ever in any other game, the ashtray maze. Like,
oh yeah.
The ashtray maze is a masterclass in level design. And Alan Wake the musical inside of the game is similar, like it's a similar masterclass in narrative design, because you're moving through this music video. And like I can't say anything else without like spoiling it completely, but
Sure.
like it's amazing. I've never seen a game do anything like this. And like it's so seamless too. Cause like it's one of those scenarios where they're blending in, you know, real world shot footage with the game, and it's meshing seamlessly as you're moving through a level. Like I have a feeling that Baldur's Gate is going to sweep all the game awards, but like Alan Wake from a design standpoint really deserves some of these too, because from an art direction perspective is amazing. Like it is so cool.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, you specifically, Tam, I think would love it.
This is actually a game I've been looking at because it's got a vibe, and I didn't play the original Alan Wake with her, but this has a vibe that like is basically identical to a lot of the shows my wife watches, and I wonder if she would have the same appreciation for it. Because I remember like we played Control together. She was like, "Oh, this is like watching a TV show," and I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, if she enjoyed Control, she will enjoy Alan Wake too. because like as I don't know how to describe it, but like there's a certain presentation aspect to both games that's very similar.
Yeah.
And there's so much nonsense going on. Just so much nonsense. But yeah, like I highly suggest it. I'm sure tomorrow I will continue on. I don't know where I am in relation to the end of the story. But I'm trying to like weave back and forth. So I'll basically, do a little Saga, do a little Alan, so that hopefully they mesh cleanly together. But supposedly you could just like follow one all the way through and then follow the other one all the way through. But I kind of like flipping back and forth. Risk of Rain 2 builds.
So we played some more Risk of Rain this week, and I think one of the things that hit me is like maybe it's been just a while since I played a roguelite, roguelike, I'm not sure. I guess Risk of Rain, you don't gain power over time. You just gain options. But watching like this random collection of items on 3 different builds sort of coalesce into something coherent is very satisfying in these games. And like seeing the combo potentials or seeing the investments pay off. There was a moment where Ash had unlocked the captain, which is like the captain of the ship, and there was a drone on the ground, and it cost like, was it 2,000 credits to open?
It was some ridiculous number for the second stage. Like 10 times the amount a normal chest would cost.
So we're like, okay, well, let's see what happens here. Let's spend some extra time on this stage and let Ash grind out some money. And it was just this giant floating like death thing, and it got him an achievement for getting it. And like his build was uniquely supported to suit that because like he basically prevented things around him from taking damage.
Normally an issue with drones in that game is they get shot down a lot. But the captain has a passive, which is defensive microbots. So projectiles, unless they shoot very fast, have a hard time getting through.
Yeah, like one of the what I keep thinking is like one of the things I'm enjoying about PoE is sort of like watching builds go from this thing that doesn't really work to this thing that's extremely efficient at what it's doing. And I get that same experience in Risk of Rain 2 over a much shorter time cycle.
Much shorter time cycle.
Yeah. I was thinking of Hades, which has a similar thing going on, where like once your build comes together, it really comes together. But like sometimes it just doesn't because it's a roguelike or a roguelite. And I really appreciate that Risk of Rain 2 would like you. It gives you enough options generally to have a build come online.
Risk of Rain 2, I actually think, does a much better job of giving you agency over your build than 1 did, and Returns does, from the addition of 3D printers and scrappers.
Yeah.
I was definitely thinking about printers where basically you're able to throw other items and turn them into specific items, but only the specific item that the 3D printer is printing.
Yes. What scrappers do is let you choose which items you're giving up when you want to go into this process, rather than have them pull from your inventory randomly.
I don't think I ran into a scrapper. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I can there's definitely like a different ethos where it's like, yes, this is going to be random, and yes, it's going to be different, but we do actually want to give you enough to succeed. It just may not be success as you define it.
We're sorry about your plans. Hope you can make do with whatever this is.
Yeah, and you probably can.
I also especially like playing this multiplayer where there's more drops to go around, and you can be like, oh, I know what they're doing, at least a little bit. They should come over here and get this item.
Yeah. Yeah, the multiplayer part of it really helps a lot because it sort of helps you sculpt the builds, and it also means you can be more focused in your build because you don't have to be a take all comers build, because it's like somebody else can handle this other kind of problem.
If someone else is playing the railgunner, you don't have to worry too much about what you're going to do for big single targets.
Yeah, I mean, and similarly, if you're playing the railgunner, you don't have to fight your build just to you don't have to fight your own build in order to handle swarms.
There's another interesting thing, and I don't remember if I think Risk of Rain 1 did this, but it feels really cool here, is the ability to corrupt items.
That's not in 1.
That's
That's
not
actually
in
a
1?
DLC addition to 2 as well.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Interesting. So the idea here is that, like, there's an item that are the glasses. They give you a 10% chance to crit, which deals double damage. But there's a corruption of that, which it turns all of your copies of this item into other glasses, which gives you a 0.5% chance to kill whatever you shot, which stacks. So you could get up to like if you had 20 of these glasses, you could get up to like a 10% chance on hit to just kill whatever you shot, other than bosses.
Their bosses is actually real specific there. It's just the teleporter boss and the final boss. Other bosses that happen to show up on the stage, fair game.
Yup. And so there's a bunch of these corruptions, which leads to even more interesting builds where, like, I know we were having a lot of conversations around the tri-tip daggers and when it's good to corrupt those and when it's not. Because tri-tip daggers cause bleed on hit versus collapse on hit.
Look, I never said this game made sense.
Well, but the underlying, like, hey, it's really neat to have choices and have choices that's you're navigating largely valid choices. It just they may not be valid for you in that particular moment, but they're valid for somebody. And that's really neat. Because, like, there's a lot of roguelites that just don't, not only do you not have any choices, but also sometimes you just get bad stuff that doesn't work for you.
Yep.
And that just feels bad.
I do think the number of successful builds brought online is one of the things Risk of Rain is doing uniquely well for a roguelike. Because I feel like there are a lot of roguelikes I've played where most of my runs end with, well, I guess this didn't really work.
Yeah.
Like, even Hades, I feel too often I find myself fighting with my choices rather than just, like, enjoying what I'm getting.
Yeah, you're like, cool. Dionysus again? Awesome.
Yeah. Or even worse, like, you get Dionysus, but, like, okay, Dionysus works, but there's a specific goddess I like. I think it's Dionysus and Aphrodite that I like together. But then you get Dionysus and you never see Aphrodite.
Yeah.
That game has some mechanics it's not telling you about what bosses can show up in the pool that I didn't learn until I started seeing what speedrunners were doing. Like, I'd already beaten that game by any metric I cared about before I learned some of the things it's actually doing under the hood.
Same.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely never learned any of that. I also think if that's not great because I played that game a lot and never learned any of that, and if that's intended, it definitely wasn't well messaged.
For anyone listening to this, the summary is that your pool is only 4 gods big.
Oh, so is there, like, it's predetermined at the beginning of the game?
It's not, but, like, once you start getting stuff, if you get stuff from 4 gods, no other ones are going to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it actually makes some amount of sense. It's something that I did know. I did notice that part, and it's one of those things where it's the newbie 5-color magic deck thing.
Yep.
Where if you have too many different things, your build is too unfocused to actually succeed.
But that does mean you don't want to just pick up that one thing from that god that just showed up that might be cool if you don't want anything else at all from that god. And it's going to lock you off of the one you might actually want.
It's one of the reasons why at the end of each section you can flush items, which is something that I never understood.
Yep.
But it's super important.
If you got this one thing from this one god and you don't want it, you might just be able to flush it.
So, Kodra has officially made it further in Path of Exile than any of us have.
Yes.
Yep. Congratulations on getting the Feared.
Yep. I have managed to defeat the Feared, which I don't think was the hardest thing for me to beat in the game. The boss that killed me the most was Cirrus, actually. But I think that was also the first boss I tried, and so I definitely learned. I went into it without doing any research. I actually think Uber Elder might be harder than the Feared.
Yeah, the Fear doesn't give them health gates.
Yeah, the Feared doesn't give me health gates. Uber Elder does. But I don't know, like, I really have been having fun fighting, like, the super challenging bosses of this game. And, like, it feels very different, like, when everything is sort of on the knife's edge and, like, you have to sort of get to know them. You sort of start treating these bosses like Dark Souls bosses, where you're looking for their tells and, like, waiting for specific attacks and then trying to dodge out of the way so that you don't die. But I think the other thing I realized this week was that one of the things I have a challenge with this game is that so much of it is around how you stay alive and you don't die, but it feels like most of the defenses are extremely passive. Like you're trying to build out a build that has defensive layers rather than like putting in active skills that give you like survivability. But one of the things I've come to just love about Hexblast is how much Hexblast itself is somewhat of a defensive ability, not just in that it deletes enemies off the map, but it also applies a bunch of freeze to them.
A bunch of people do Tornado Shot as Cold Convert for exactly that reason.
I should try that build. I bet I would also like it.
That build is more of a delete everything on screen, more like, yes, I get that Hexblast is also kind of like this, but Hexblast you have to at least pick a direction to aim in, sort of. Tornado Shot does not have that problem.
Yeah, you just push a button and it deletes the entire screen. But it struggles at killing bosses.
I don't struggle at killing bosses.
No, you are in a bosser build.
Yeah, like mappers tend to be really good at clearing maps, but kind of crap at clearing bosses.
Most of them are okay at killing the map boss.
Yeah, but anything stronger than a map boss, it kind of struggles with.
Is this just because their damage is too unfocused?
The goal there is to project damage to as much of the screen as possible, rather than put a lot of damage onto single targets.
And fast. Like they move extremely fast and don't have to target at anything and are just spraying death everywhere.
If you've seen Flicker Strike, the sort of ideal Flicker Strike build is one where you click Flicker Strike and let go when the map boss is dead.
But yeah, like I think the bosses in this game are at least somewhat interesting, and it's kind of sad. Like, it's kind of hard for me that they are so gated so far behind. Like, I wish there was more tiers rather than just Maven and Uber Maven. Because Memory Game is a cool mechanic, I think.
Yeah. We've realized that Kodra and I are just wired totally different as human beings for games.
It's like, it reminds me of...
Towers of Hanoi boss?
No, I was going to say it reminds me of the dance fight, Heigen.
Oh, it is kind of like that, except not the same thing every time.
And it's harder to see what's going on to me.
I sort of disagree with that.
Yeah,
that was the only annoying thing about Heigen.
Yeah, they show you big, bright green sections of the floor in the order that you have to go.
Like Heigen... Okay, so sorry. I mean, like, Memory Game is harder for me to see what's going on than Heigen was.
Yeah,
Heigen, I could memorize a dance and just execute it the same way every single time.
Yeah, well, you said memorize it there, whereas like Maven, I feel messages very well. It's just the messaging is telling you different things, and so you're expected to react to it. Whereas Heigen is just like, do this dance that you have like built muscle memory for.
Like everything about me in video games is me trying to shift it to muscle memory so I can just chill out and not have to think about it. I mean that's like my highest tier of where I want to be in video games is just I want to not have to think about what my hands are doing.
I definitely understand this as I do play Celeste, and I frequently talk about how if I'm thinking about what I'm doing, I'm already failing.
Yeah.
But in a game like this, I like to actually be like engaged with the fight. Like as much as I struggled with it, I can't say Cirrus wasn't engaging.
See, I didn't think Cirrus was that difficult. But
well,
I also have all the
But
survival.
you can
in the
also
world.
just stand in stuff, Bell.
yeah, I was
I know.
about to say, can you survive his die beams?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, like
This
the
is
only
that
thing
completely different approach to character building thing again.
the only thing that straight up kills me is his meteor. Like
No,
there's some stuff that I have to get out of because it's slowly killing me, but like most of the things are like, yeah, no, I can react fairly slowly and still get out of it and survive.
Yeah, so when he starts doing the 4 spinning lasers and then like periodically he'll call out his die beams and shoot 4 lasers at you, I think I can survive about two of those lasers and the third will kill me. And those happen fast, so I need to really be out of there. But I need to but the other thing is I need to dash somewhere other than the big clouds all over the map because those will also kill me.
Yeah, I mean, like, also on Searing Exarch, I can just stand in the middle of the ball phase.
Oh, no, absolutely not. That's nonsense. But, like, yeah, no, I get that. You have to understand, then I get to do a Breach Stone, and, like, I get to the Breach Lord at the end, and it doesn't take any game actions. It just falls over dead. I don't know. Like, we are sort of in the, like, we are playing different games, but
we are very much.
I very much think it's interesting that both of these playstyles work in different areas.
Yeah, like I can't do Crucible with any of the characters that I enjoy playing because Crucible is don't ever get hit. Never,
Sanctum,
never get hit.
Sanctum?
Yeah, Sanctum. Sorry, Sanctum.
I mean, Sanctum is also extremely hard for me to do. I've been cursing because of some terrible failures, but that's just because like Sanctum is hard. Sanctum is very hard. It's very lucrative.
I can get the
very
furthest
hard.
in Sanctum on my SRS characters because those are basically just heat-seeking missiles.
Yeah,
that I can stand still and they go out and find the target and kill it.
SRS has become the meta Sanctum build at this point because SRS can go around corners.
Right, like if it is within a certain radius, it will go off and find them and kill them, independent of what you're doing.
I imagine SRS would still probably have a time on some of the like small arena boss rushes.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
the stupid flame, like the fireball thing while you're trying to avoid like the flame beam while fighting a bunch of little bosses in arena. Those are annoying, but
yeah, those escalate quite a bit as you go down the floors. In the end, it's just a big open arena, and there are meteors falling down everywhere.
Yeah, the meteor room was not in Sanctum League. People say it's the hardest thing currently in Sanctum.
Oh, interesting. I don't disagree.
I have a feeling that Sanctum is going to eat some significant nerfs by the time the next league happens.
When you say
I
nerfs,
suspect
Reward
the thing they
nerfs.
actually nerf is access to it.
Oh, that's terrible. That's the worst answer. I kind of would rather them improve access to it and just nerf the loot drops.
Well,
I want them to nerf base access to it and maybe give it Atlas support or something.
I mean, if they nerf access to it, like people who don't want to do it can still sell their books to people who do want to do it, and they'll just cost more, and that'll
You could still sell them for pretty good money if you had a lot of them. Because like I gathered up 10 to 15 books at a couple times, other than the ones that I pretty regularly dumped in the guild bank and was selling them for 20 chaos a book.
I am biased, but my build relies on a Sanctum item, so...
It worked fine in the league where that item didn't exist.
It's true, but that item is like doubling the damage output.
There are other ways to double. I mean, they require some other very specific items to make that build go dumb.
I mean, I guess I did see the video of how to make a Shaper Helm. That's the correct laugh.
But hey, at least you can do some of that with SSF materials.
So
Yeah, we're going to have all this stuff that we can't use for currency. So, you might as well craft with it.
no. So here's the problem with this. The first part of it is, I want to say Essence of Insanities.
Yep.
Those aren't SSF friendly.
Sure they are.
Sure they are.
I mean, we're going to be generating a lot of maps so that you can basically throw maps away on essences. Because the correct way to farm essences is to go in, find the essences, kill the essences, leave the map.
Also, if you need specific essences, specifically if you need the special essences, there are 4 specific types you need to look at to corrupt. You don't need to corrupt all of them.
It's true, and I will definitely be learning that, but those show up only so often.
It's true. They're not that rare, but they're pretty rare.
But yeah, I am at 130 of 132 Atlas passives, and I do want to try and full complete my Atlas before the league's up. The only thing I have left is the synthesized invitation and the Elder Slayer invitation.
Sheesh.
And I failed my attempt last night at the Elder Slayer invitation because I was...
Maybe don't do it at 80 quant.
Maybe I won't do it at 80 quant. This is insane invitations is insane. They are correct about that message.
See, Elder Slayer doesn't seem like it would be a very difficult one.
So you have no way of modifying the quantity of a map other than whatever affixes you get. You don't get to use the map crafting option. You don't get any Atlas passives. So you need to get to 80%. This probably means you're corrupting this map, this invitation.
People have reported being able to do this without getting fully there on the number, but I don't know what the breakpoints are or any of that. And at this point in the league, I don't care to learn.
Anyways, it did awful things to me at that point. I think I might have had negative 12 player resist on that map. It was bad. That's bad. That's a bad pass. That's a bad affix for me.
There are affixes that just kill you.
It's true.
It doesn't have to be reflect to just kill you.
Well, nothing. Reflect is the best one for me. Reflect does absolutely nothing to me. I mean, they're really good at reflecting damage back to my mines. The other thing I will say is using my phrase I've been using, I did the feared scoured like a coward. Because no, I'm not letting those guys have any more strength to them than they have by default. I don't need the Shaper to be scarier. I did manage to do the Shaper Deathless, though, which was my first time doing that. So I was very happy with that. But yeah, I at this point, I'm trying to wrap up challenges, trying to see if I can't get into the low 20s. I've got a couple of low-hanging fruit right now. Low-hanging fruit being spend a bunch of divs on a Doriani's map.
Yeah. I have no idea what they're going for, but prices are just going up.
I mean, it's going to be dumber now than it would have been if we'd done it a month ago.
Right.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of people's last map.
Prices go up a lot at the end of a league.
Especially for things that get you challenges.
Well, yeah. But just in general, prices of things are inflated because there's far fewer people still playing.
I should see how much omens are selling for.
That would be in the list of things that complete challenges for people.
Yup. Maybe I'll do a bunch of Trials of the Ancestor. I need to borrow somebody to help me get my revelries done.
Potentially tomorrow we could try this thing. I can survive real good in Toda.
It turns out you can. There's one truly bonkers thing that is
win solo
asterisk. It means you don't have any of your NPC buddies, but you can do this in multiplayer, and you have to be at least rank 200. I
am over 200, and so we could spawn on me and try it.
I am also over 200. I'm at 230 right now. But yeah, I feel like I have learned a lot this league, and also like I like the bosses. I like being a bosser, and so it's a good thing that this build I have is good at bosses.
Yeah, like my hope is that you get good enough at bossing that I can just feed you all the maps and you carry the rest of us.
I can do some decent carrying.
Because like
I can confirm.
what I dropped in the bank is a fraction of what I had from running them myself. Like I dropped a bunch of like Guardian maps in the bank, and I've run a lot of Guardian maps this league.
Yeah, especially if I'm doing it scoured, I can scout. Like I could definitely carry people through scoured invitations.
All I care about is getting the Void Stones. That's all I care about.
Well, I can get you Void Stones, and I can get you Atlas passives. Granted,
the Atlas Passes part do require you to put it up the invitation yourself.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you get the Maven witnessing credit if you're doing it with somebody else?
You do get that though.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's whoever consumes the thing to start it gets the Atlas passive. I don't think it matters who kills it.
Is there Atlas support for getting more invitations?
I mean,
yes.
Which invitations? Because yes. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so like if you're talking red-blue, yes, there's a thing that gives you basically credit, double credit, and then Maven, there's one that gives you a chance of getting double credit.
No, I don't want witnesses. I want invitations.
Like the screaming, whatever.
Yeah, the actual item that you consume.
The Maven ones, not so much. The other ones, yes.
Okay.
I mean, each one of these bosses basically has a tree on the Atlas tree, or like a branch on the Atlas tree.
Yeah, I was mostly wondering if there was because I think the limiting factor at this point would be getting those like the Maven invitations that you need to get dropped off of bosses. Usually, the pre-pinnacle bosses is where I see them drop most.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I always end up with a bunch of them.
Delve provides.
No, I mean like I just run a bunch of maps.
Because I don't think these come out of Delve.
Yeah, like I end up running a bunch of maps just because I have to run maps to get Sulfite.
I see.
And I might as well be either running red or blue altars or witnessing if I'm running a map. So like blue altars are the gamble altars, but like really for SSF, they may be the correct choice because those are also the scarab altars.
What do you mean by blue altars?
The
Eater altars.
Eater altars?
Yeah.
Searing Exarch is good for div cards and a bunch of things that give reliable value in trade.
Yeah, Chaos Orbs and alts and
I was about to say
other stuff.
my one time I got a good Exarch altar was like 1 or 2% chance to drop Veiled Chaos Orbs. Veiled Chaos Orbs are probably still good for SSF.
They'll be way better for SSF than they actually are in a trade league.
Yeah.
Because they're not that much difference than a normal Chaos Orb.
I mean, they are used in a bunch of high-end crafts.
Right, but like price-wise, they're maybe 5 Chaos apiece. Like they're not a bonanza if you're trying to make money in a trade economy. But
and
for
the other thing
SSF,
is, if you're going for a real high-end craft, that's not what you want to use anyway.
Right, you want to
go all the way to Ashling.
Yeah, that is the correct choice. Ashling being a specific person in Betrayal that you have to have in research. When you defeat the Betrayal boss, it's a thing.
I mean, you get the bench for the safe house as well, but yeah.
But yeah, I was also we've just started the new league, the like other weird little league where they put all of the mechanics in every single screen while you level. Is there anything else specific to this?
Nope.
Shifting stones? Okay.
That's really it. They want to preview all of the various things they just added to the Atlas this patch. They want you to make sure you know about them.
Was Delirium only recently added to the Atlas?
The keystone that makes it endless was just added to the Atlas.
Oh, okay.
Like the Tower Defense Keystone for Blight or the Schism Keystone for Legion.
I feel like if you are spec'd into Delirium, you don't want this keystone.
If depends on how, like,
I guess
you
it
need
depends-
some serious character power to be able to force an entire map while delirious without running out of time.
So I get that. But on the other hand, if you are, at least for the current patch, if you are spec'd into Delirium, you might be trying to do the challenge. If you're trying to do the challenge, you need the splinters of Simulacrum.
Simulacrum is not expensive to buy in trade.
Yeah.
Like, it probably is right now, but it was not earlier.
Got it. Do people just not want to do Simulacrum because...
Correct!
Most builds can't do Simulacrum.
Should really figure out... I should try a Simulacrum to see if it's as scary as people are making me think it is.
I mean,
we have
it's
a lot
fighting...
of splinters in Standard, so once this goes to Standard, you should probably try it.
I mean, Simulacrum is dealing with all of the monsters, seriously, all of the monsters in the Sarn hub.
Or
that's the entire map.
could be Act 3, could be Act 5. It's one of the 5 acts.
But yeah,
is your base of operations there.
Yeah, you are in a very small map with just so many monsters,
and they usually favor high survivability characters.
Yeah.
Well, while I definitely understand that's what people are saying, I do kind of just delete monsters. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I also have a lot of that's the other thing is I have gotten a good. This build is very mobile between having flame dash and shield charge. I do a lot of going clear a path, go to the safe path, clear a path, go to the safe path when I'm dealing with stuff like that. Charge into the mines, even though there are enemies there, because there won't be once you detonate them. But yeah, I've been doing this league. I've also been taking it as an opportunity to actually sit down and listen to what the characters say. This game has a really interesting story. I know people have been telling me that for a while. But yeah, now that I actually know what any of the proper nouns are for this game, I know what a Karui is, I know what a Rayclast is, I know what an Oriath is. This game uses those basically as part of the first introduction to everything. This game tells its story assuming you already know its story. And maybe this is the point, because maybe I'm doing this the right way, where I tried to listen to the story, decided it was absolute nonsense, stopped paying attention until I played through the game a whole bunch, picked up bits and pieces through osmosis, and now that I have that osmosis knowledge, I'm going back and listening to the story.
I mean, to be fair, that's how I learned the story of this game.
I ignored
it for a very, really long time, but
I don't think this is a good way to tell a story.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not gonna start falling over myself to give them credit.
It's a really interesting story told really poorly, but is this the best story an ARPG has? I don't know, maybe. But is this...
It's close?
Is this the best that ARPGs can do?
I mean, it's not a high bar.
This is some Nox slander. I got news for you.
I'm actually not familiar with Nox.
Tam, you just name-checked a game that I think 5 of our listeners will remember. 3 of which are in channel right now.
I haven't thought about that game in a long time.
I'm just saying, it's one of the games that defined ARPG, and it tells a fairly tight, pretty coherent story.
With some full motion videos, just to wrap that back around.
Yeah, I mean, it does involve somebody. It is an isekai.
Yeah, I really think that this game does have an interesting story told really poorly, and I wish there was a way to better onboard players into it. I do think that
there is. It's called go to YouTube and watch Kitten Cat Noodles.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, yeah, because there is a single lore YouTuber for this game.
That's also not a good answer.
No,
I
it's not.
also don't think Destiny is telling an interesting story, no matter how many hours of YouTube you try and get me to watch.
The funny thing about that is Destiny got arguably better at telling its story in game, but the story got worse.
I feel like there's a difference between having a good idea and having a good result. Destiny storytelling has some really cool ideas.
Yeah.
Yes, they stole some of them for Lancer.
Also a good idea, and in this case, a good result.
I am thankful that Path of Exile kind of does a crappy job of telling a story. And the reason why I'm thankful is because it is extremely repeatable as a result, because you can ignore the story on multiple playthroughs, whereas you're not necessarily having to deeply care about the sequence of story.
I'm just gonna say that could be an option.
You don't have to play through the same escort quest with a weird, slightly racist caricature.
Like, I feel like this game could be telling a better story, at least like trying to do a better job telling its story, maybe using some of that cool tech that came out where you can like hot click, click over specific names to understand what the heck people are talking about.
I think Path of Exile 2 is going to be that. Based on what I've seen of gameplay, it seems like it's going to be more of a narrative experience.
And then what you can do is you can possibly like have a skip cutscenes button just like hot keyed onto your controller.
Kind of like we have a skip all tutorials at the beginning of the game. You could just say skip all cutscenes from now on.
Skip all cutscenes. I mean, that's how we do it in the Celeste community. We have bound specific inputs to a single button to skip cutscene.
Chicory speedrunners bind skip cutscene to mouse wheel because you can skip screen transitions. They're cutscenes. We swear.
Oh no. This is how you out of bounds, isn't it?
It's one of several ways. But like, yeah, this Nox aside, Nox is not older than I am, but I think only barely.
I think it came out in 2000.
Okay, so it's a good deal younger than I am. But the genre has not made very good attempts at telling stories.
No.
Mostly because the genre leader is extremely bad at it, and that's sort of carried through. Titan Quest did an okay job. I haven't played enough of Grim Dawn to say whether it does or not.
It doesn't tell. Like, it's an interesting story, but it's not a great story.
I will say my initial impression of like this game's story was like kind of completely wrong, because if you do just pay a surface level attention to it, like you get this idea that, hey, you're in Rayclast. Rayclast is terrible. You can't, like, there's this other place called Oriath. Oriath is like a much nicer place.
I mean, that is what the game is trying to sort of suggest at the start.
Yeah.
Intentionally. Like, it's just lying to you.
Yeah, but like you should, more than anyone, you should understand that being in Oriath is kind of terrible. Because
I mean, the Duelist was having a pretty good time of it.
You were probably thrown out of there for either very good reason or possibly no good reason. Like, there is a completely skippable section, which is the Letters of Exile, which kind of shows you that most of the people who are getting exiled because, like, hey, Oriath's actually a, like, authoritarian, theocratic nightmare right now. But, like, the vibes of the game don't give that off as much. And if your storytelling quickly becomes just on vibes because, like, the text is kind of impenetrable with how many proper nouns are being thrown out, it's very challenging. Also, fact...
Like, to be fair, like, you got exiled at this island because it is notorious for killing people that go there. You know, it is a hard place with very deadly monsters and all that wonderful stuff that, you know, you were essentially being sentenced to your death by going there. But there's also, like, a bunch of hardy people who have figured out how to survive here.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's...
Rayclast may be Australia. Just saying.
Sure. but there's also a challenge where there's a lot of like things go like interactables out in the world that are like going to read over top of like you, and even if you like cancel them, they'll keep reading out. So that's probably the story that's most likely to get lodged into your head. I know this was true for me. Like while I'm going around killing, I'm getting this long story about Calm, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, Calm must be a really relevant character to this story." I will keep in my head that Calm is an important character. Calm is like a historical footnote. All of those are just like history footnotes to like build out this, but that doesn't come across in the way the story is delivered, because those are like the one unskippable cutscene you get if you interact with those.
It'd be kind of like if you were running around the real world and you kept running into stories about King Arthur, and you're like, "Oh, this must be like a really important, relevant person."
I do appreciate that they gave Callum the chance to show up for the trials mechanic.
Yeah.
Because that gave him a chance to, actually have some more words rather than just being dead. Also, it caused some questions about where the hell here he is. But whatever.
It's interesting to me because like that's one of those things where, because of the way that line was delivered in game, because the like fact that I exited out of the like scrolling text and the message didn't end, it put more importance on that message to me, the player. Like I felt like, oh, if they're not going to let me skip this must be really important, and to like latch onto this detail. And then that detail was not important, and that just fed into me not treating the story seriously. It's an interesting story told really poorly. But like telling stories in video games can be hard. I get that, but like it does make it's an interesting thing to keep in mind.
That's probably a show, or a show plus some show.
Maybe that.
Any final thoughts?
Can't think of any.
Hopefully you enjoyed the show.
Both Risk of Rain games are real good.
They are. It's very true.
Oh, real quick, since I mentioned that it was crashing so badly last week, there has been another patch to City Skylines 2. It seems to have mostly fixed the crash problems. So it is in fact playable, and garbage works.
Nice.
Hey.
Congrats, Loading Ready Run, on your lifetime $10 million earned for
that's
Desert Bus.
that's staggering.
Good grief. I hope Penn and Teller have heard about this and are just joyous.
I think Teller was on like day one or something.
Good.
Oh.
Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.